Hello YouTube, it's Barbara Jean. Um, I'm having some more thoughts. God is really good to me. He always seems to give me a lot of thoughts in the middle of the night, so I didn't get much sleep. But that's okay, because I enjoy thinking about him. I was having some interesting thoughts on grief, actually. Uh, I was thinking about something that had happened to me when I was living in Australia for a year for um, some work issues that I was doing, and while I was there. Anyway, I had an interesting experience while I was there. I thought I'd share with you. Uh, uh, when let me just first go back. When I was about 11 years old, I had a lot of things happen to me when I was around 11. Um, I lost a little sister to a car accident. She was hit by a car, and the doctors tried to save her, but unfortunately she died a couple of days later after the accident. And at the time, I didn't cry. I didn't know how to cry. I was in shock, and I didn't realize I was in shock. And I didn't weep. I didn't cry. Um, so anyway, many years later, I was in Australia. I guess you could. It was over 30 years. 30 years later, about, well, about 30 years later, I was in Australia, and I was at a movie. It was called The Horse Whisperer with Robert Redford. I don't know if any of you have ever seen it. Beautiful film. Cinematography is fabulous. But at the beginning of the film, the little girl, young girl, is hit by a truck. Her best friend who is with her dies in this accident. And as I was watching this film, at the beginning of this film, and fortunately God knew, well, God planned the whole thing. I was sitting in a theater that was practically empty in a section that I was completely isolated in. Um, Completely. It was a very strange situation. There was no one around me. No one could see me. I couldn't see them. But as I was watching this film, and at the beginning of this film, the accident happened, my whole body began to tremble, just shaking from head to toe. And as I'm sitting there watching this opening scene, um, shaking uncontrollably, I said to the Lord, "Why am I shaking? God, what is going on? Why am I shaking so hard like this? What's happening?" And immediately my sister's name flashed across my mind. And my next thought was, I never grieved for my sister. And the next thing that happened, which is why it was probably a very, very good thing there was no one else around me, I started to scream, literally scream. The movie, thankfully, was very loud. I grabbed my coat that was sitting beside me, I'd laid beside me, and I put it over my mouth and I screamed into my coat, just screaming and screaming. I think I screamed for a good 10 minutes. Um, then after that happened, I wept. I wept, I wept, and I wept. All through, I think I wept the entire film. And when I got home from the theater, I wept. Um, I just wanted to give you that testimony because of some things that I was thinking about. First, I want to read a couple of scriptures for you. The first one is in Matthew. This is a verse from the Beatitudes. Um, it's in chapter 5, verse 4. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Okay. The next one I want to read is the story, or part of the story um, of Lazarus. Excuse me, of Lazarus and Mary and Martha. Jesus has been informed a couple of days earlier that his friend had died, and but Jesus said this was meant to be. Basically, it's to show God's power and His love. So he goes to visit Martha and Mary in their grief. All right, now first he greets Mary, and this is what it reads in John chapter 11, and it says in verse 20, excuse me, it was Martha. Okay, it was Martha he saw first, sorry. Um, when Mary heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary sat in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would have not have died. And even now I know that whatever you ask from God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, and he who is coming into the world. When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying quietly, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews were with him in her house, when the Jews were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Then Mary, when she came when she came where Jesus was and saw him, fell at his feet, saying, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled, and he said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. Some things that were going through my mind at this time when I was thinking about this passage was, first of all, it's a very beautiful passage of Jesus' compassion, but also his humanity. I just love Jesus. Anyway, there's a Jewish practice that was a Jewish practice in those days. I don't know if it's still today, of hiring professional weepers. There was a reason for this, and the one that I think maybe we should look at a little bit, that weepers were brought into, when someone was grieving, they would hire these professional weepers. Sounds kind of strange to our modern mind, but what it would do, they would weep. They were very good criers, if you will, basically people who are able to empathize and shed tears and wail and not be ashamed of their tears, to help those who are grieving to overcome their grief. Tears and weeping help heal the heart. It helps you overcome grief. Grief can get stuck in your spirit. This is what I learned when I was in Australia, and when 30 years later, after my sister's death, I realized that I was stuck in grief and didn't realize this grief had hindered me in so many ways, because I had not grieved. Okay, we in our modern world prefer to think of Job in his stoic attitude towards his tragedy when he lost his children and everything else, but his children, he lost all his children in one fell swoop. And Job stoically says, well, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. I'm sure he wasn't quite as stoic as that, but nonetheless, that was what he said. The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. And not once in the book of Job did I read anything about Job weeping for his children. Not once did I read anything about him shedding any tears, which is rather, like I said, a Western way of thinking. We hold our grief in because we have that stiff upper lip. We're told, big boys don't cry, all these things that, if you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about. We're not encouraged to weep. We're not encouraged to grieve. However, grief can get stuck in your spirit. So this practice of professional weeping uh, really did have a practical use to help heal the heart. And uh, when Jesus heard the weeping, it touched his heart. It um, helped him because Jesus couldn't show his power to raise Lazarus until he had actually dealt with his own grief. Jesus is amazing. Isn't he amazing, people? This is the most manly man I've ever encountered in my whole entire existence and will ever encounter. He wasn't ashamed to weep. And when it says Jesus wept, we often think of maybe a tear or two, but I don't think that's what it was. I think he bawled. I think he let it all out. I think he wailed because he loved this man, and it grieved him that others were grieved. It grieved him that Lazarus was departed. I'm certain that he felt the full impact of what we would feel if we lost a loved one. And Jesus showed us um, that it is indeed manly to weep when you are grieving. I once went to a funeral not too long ago of a man who had 5 sons, five um, older sons, grown men, big men. It was the most remarkable funeral I've ever been to in my life. These 5 men stood at the front talking about their father, weeping openly over the loss of this man they cherished, who taught them so much and they learned so much from. It was the most remarkable testimony I've ever saw in my life. And I just think that sometimes we forget that uh, God loves us so much and he weeps over us. He wants us to um, not allow the loss of a loved one, a loss of a home, a loss of things that we cherish to hinder us in our spiritual growth. And it can hinder our spiritual growth. It could also hinder the power of God. Um, but Jesus showed us, we must allow the grief to teach us, to heal us, and but not to hold on to grief. Grief is not something that's supposed to last and linger with us forever and ever. I miss my sister very much, but the sorrow is gone because God has given me comfort. Jesus shows us he is able to comfort those who weep. And so anyway, it was just some thoughts I had. I hope it helps. Um, anyway, you have a blessed day, and may the Lord comfort your heart and give you peace.